Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our weekly podcast where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. This is a free service from Property Ventures so that you can keep current and learn from some of the best around New Zealand. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome back to our latest podcast, and we welcome back Olly Newland to the show, where he uses his expertise in the commercial world to enlighten us about different opportunities that you can get in the commercial investing. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, Olly.
Hi Mark, how are you doing?
Great stuff. Right, today we're going to talk about the differences of commercial and residential property. Most of us listeners here know quite a bit about residential, and you'll be a lot here won't know a lot at all about commercial. Olly has a great experience in this, so let's start off with what's the major difference in your view there, Olly?
Well, the first thing about commercial property, you've got to understand it's not as frightening as it may sound. A lot of people get very nervous and say, look, we don't understand commercial property, it's another world, but it is a huge part of the market, and it's also very important that it's not political. You don't have any tenancy tribunal to worry about. You can charge as much bond as you like. You can throw out your tenants much more easily than you can a residential property. So there are some advantages with commercial, and there are some dangers, and there's some pluses as well. Let's take it very simply so you understand how commercial property works. And the first thing you should know is that commercial property is completely different from residential, and it works along different lines altogether. And I'll cover that in a second, but let's start at the very simplest end. There's three major types of commercial property, very broadly speaking. There's shops, and everybody understands what shops are. There are offices, everybody knows what an office is. And there's factories, or heavy commercial, or heavy industrial, if you like. And they can be bought for as much as, or as little as you like, as an ordinary house, or you can spend tens of millions, depending what your taste is. The important thing with a commercial property, where it differs from residential, is that who the tenant is and what the lease is in a commercial property is 99% of its value. When you take a residential property, it doesn't really matter if it's rented to a good tenant or a bad tenant, or whether you increase the rent or decrease the rent. The residential property is worth more or less the same in any particular market situation. When it comes to an industrial or commercial or retail, who the tenant is can make a vast difference to the property. So in other words, you can have two buildings or two shops or two anythings side by side, each producing the same rent. It could be identical in every way, but one may have a very heavy, strong tenant in it, producing, say, $100,000 a year rent, while the other one may have just a Mickey Mouse takeaway in it, also producing $100,000 a year rent. Now, investors will queue up down the road for the heavy tenant and will pay twice as much, exaggerating slightly, for the heavy tenant than they will for the lightweight tenant. So if you take that $100,000 a year rent as an example, if it was somebody like Fletch Industries or something like that, people may be happy with a 5% return. Would make the building worth $2 million. If it was a Mickey Mouse tenant, also producing $100,000 a year rent, they'd only pay $1 million for it. You understand how I'm saying?
So just on that, how does it get decided between the difference of the 5% or the 10% return?
You look at the lease. The lease is the kingpin, if you like, of how to value a commercial property. And we haven't got time today to go through all the details in the lease, but a commercial lease is often dozens and dozens of pages long. And the important thing about a commercial lease, the tenants usually pay the outgoings, which you don't get in residential properties. They pay the rates, they pay the insurance, they'll pay the internal maintenance. It's common for the landlord of a commercial property just to maintain the outside of the building. But it gets more interesting than that. The trick in commercial property is to find sleeper properties. There are many sleepy landlords out there who own commercial properties and don't realise that they could be worth much more. And it's literally true that you can double the value of a commercial property within weeks, even overnight, I'm not exaggerating, by being able to convert a poor lease into a solid, good lease. And if you can do that, then of course the yield goes down. In other words, people will pay more and more for the same cash flow return.
Right. Yep.
So your building can go up very rapidly, nothing to do with inflation. You can't do that with a house or residential property. If you don't quite understand that, doesn't matter. You can call me up and I'll explain to you more fully. Then we can argue whether retail shops, that is, or industrial, that's factories, or whether offices are the best types of investment. Again, it comes down to who the tenant is. But generally speaking, very generally, retail is the most popular. Shops are popular because shops are sort of halfway between residential and commercial. And I find that most commercial tenants that are in shops don't really take much notice of the lease. So every few weeks, every few months, a retail tenant has some other gripe or complaint or wish list or something like that. And of course, that's a chance for you to go back and have another bite of the cherry. With a bit of luck, screw the rent up a little bit further, or strengthen up the lease or whatever it is. So it's a lot of fun with shops.
Yeah.
But seriously, though, you have to buy shops, and it's important where the shops are sited. And it's even more important to remember we're now in the digital age and the computer age and online age, and many shops are going out of business or struggling. For instance, shops that specialise in books and paper products are having a harder time now because you can buy the stuff online, or you can not only buy it online, you can send your letters by email. And so I wouldn't personally like to buy a bunch of shops which have a bookshop or an envelope selling shop as the main tenant. So you really want to buy shops which have destination tenants in them. That is, shops where people have to go. You have to go to a restaurant. You have to go to a place to get your hair done. Similar places like that, because you can't get those done online. And the second thing about shops, and it applies to all commercial property, is that it's better to buy multiple tenancies where there's more than one tenant. There's a bit of a risk if you buy one building with one tenant in it, whether it's a shop, whether it's an office, or whether it's an industrial property. One tenant, with the best will in the world, they can leave or they can go broke, and you're left with an empty building, and it's not that easy to lease. It's true that a residential property can lease or rent out fairly quickly, but commercial property can sit around for a long time. And it's important that you don't buy a commercial property which has specialised use, because if the tenants leave, you might have a specialised type building, and you may not be able to find a tenant that fits into it. So you want to buy the sort of Japanese car equivalent of a building, something that everybody can understand and drive.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's no different than the person having a block of 8 flats. The risk is lower if one tenant goes. It doesn't really matter so much.
That's right. So, for instance, at the moment, I'm dealing with a block of shops of my own. It's got 14 tenants in it. I couldn't care less if one of them left tomorrow. In fact, they do leave now and then, and it takes a couple of weeks to rent it out again. Doesn't even tinkle the teacups. So it's multiple tenancies, 2 or more, with leases falling at different rates at different times. Is probably the safest way to go if you're not sure of it. That doesn't mean to say you'll turn down a single tenant if it came along, but you've got to think about it. Another thing you've got to consider in commercial property is, besides shops, of course, another popular one is small factories. There's always another car painter, electrician, plumber, or something like that who wants a small commercial factory to do their work in, and they are in high demand, and they can be bought for a few $100,000, not much more than a house, and they're very popular, and they're pretty well bulletproof. There's always another painter or plumber or electrician who wants space, and so they're very popular too. And another advantage of commercial, of course, is the returns are usually much higher than residential property. It's not uncommon for a commercial property to produce up to 10% return, depending on the quality of the tenant. So you can get 10%, 8%, 7.5%. You can work out all sorts of values, and 5% is for very good properties. It's not uncommon either. So in all these cases, it's better than residential, and you can create your own capital growth by messing around with the leases and the tenants, as I told you before, and you don't have to wait for inflation to do it. It's a huge industry, just as big as residential in dollar terms, and a lot of people who invest in residential just simply ignore the commercial market, and I suggest that you get into it. Now, as it comes to mortgaging commercial property, the banks are a little tougher on commercial property. They too look at the strength of the leases, because they put in front of them, that put the deal in front of themselves and say, what would happen if something goes wrong? We, the bank, will end up owning this. What will be our position? They know that with a residential property, they can sell it pretty quickly. It's pretty liquid. Commercial property may be a little difficult if it's vacant. So banks tend to lend between 60 and 65% at a slightly higher, perhaps 0.5% higher rate of interest. So it's just a numbers game in the end. And of course, as the value of a commercial property goes up, you can refinance and do work on it or buy another one, or just as you can with a residential property. The interest rate, as I said before, is a fraction higher, but not more than about 0.5%, maybe 1%, depending on the deal. And you can get the mortgages up to 25 years, and usually interest only for the first 5 years, then perhaps a little bit of principal interest, very similar to a residential mortgage. But 80% mortgages are hard to get, if not impossible, unless you've got other securities.
That's probably the one thing that stops some investors or residential investors going in, because they can't get they need that 40% deposit to put in.
Well, if they've got other properties, if they've got a mixture of properties, if they have some residential properties already which have equity in it, instead of just buying some more residential, they need a mix, because commercial and residential run on different rails, as I told you before. And when the residential market may be relatively flat, while the commercial market may be going gangbusters.
Yeah.
And at the moment it is, but it doesn't make headlines. It's a strange thing. It's not political. You don't see the parliamentarians standing up and screaming about the speculators in commercial property.
No.
It doesn't happen, and there are plenty of them. So I suggest that you investors out there have a think about that. Come and have a chat with me if you want to about commercial property, and learn the advantages, disadvantages of it. And you can have a lot of fun with this business, and it's done me work very well over the years. And it also has traps in it, because you are on your own. There's no tenancy tribunal to go to. So there's no, if you've got a dispute with your tenant, you have to fight, slog it out yourself, either face to face or through disputes tribunal if it's a small case, or through court. The other trick, and before I wind this particular section up, is unless you're extremely wealthy, don't buy a building where the tenant is bigger and stronger than you are, because then they start running the show. And I learnt that years ago when I bought a bank. I thought I was very clever buying a building with a bank in it in Hamilton. And I thought I was really proud. I strutted around feeling like really smart that I'd bought this bank. Well, that was a mistake, because I could never get a rent increase out of the buggers. Because every time I went for a rent increase, they said, no, we're going to leave. And they had the money to do it. So I had 10 years of the same rent. But anyway, I finally tucked it into some farmer who didn't understand the difference, and that was the end of that.
Just one question on the yields there, Ollie, is so with residential, you go to the Remuera, was the yield's going to be a 4% instead of a 10% if you're lucky. How does that differ from? Is it the best places like the Epsoms and what have you,
no,
the lower yield rather than a higher yield?
No, where the property is, we're talking commercial still.
Yes.
Where the property is important, but it isn't as important as who the tenant is. The commercial property can be almost anywhere if the tenant is heavy. You can buy in the poorest areas and the wealthiest areas. You can buy out of town. You can buy in Stewart Island for all I care. If the tenant is strong, and you've got perhaps bank guarantees or personal guarantees which are really heavy, then, and I'm exaggerating slightly, you understand, then where it is, it comes second to who it is.
Yeah. Who
it is and how good the lease is the primary importance. And one more thing when I think of it, earthquake-prone buildings. When it comes to commercial property, you've got to check whether they've been classified as earthquake-prone. And most councils will give you that information. And the rule is, generally speaking, if it's 30%, 34% or more strength of a new building, then it's okay. And if it's less, then you have to think about fixing it up. But strengthening a building is not always as difficult as it sounds. But it can be a bit nerve-wracking. And in Auckland, where I am, it's become less of an issue, but in other areas it's a bigger issue. So bear that in mind, that if you're buying older buildings, you want to get an earthquake report done on it as a part of your due diligence.
Yeah. So a question for you. So with commercial, when you go in to buy, is there two strategies? Either are you a person that wants a strong tenant, strong lease in place, like you're sort of commenting on how important it is, or other people just said the opportunities with commercial is you can go in an undeveloped building or a tenant that's just got a lease that's just finished. It's worth nothing almost apart from the land and a bit of a building.
Right.
Is that a strategy? Just some people operate only go on there and then it's double your money within a short time, potentially.
There's several strategies there. There are investors out there who just basically want to buy a blue chip property and tick the bank statement once a month. So they buy it all ready made. It's producing the maximum it possibly can, nothing great, but they just don't want to worry about it. They just tick the bank statement, forget it, and walk away for the next 10 or 20 years. There's others, and I think I'm one of them, who likes to buy these sleepers, these rough ones. The rough in the sense that the tenancies are all over the place and everything's got behind, and turn these ugly ducklings into something better. And that way you can double and treble your money and your income as well, and everything else that goes with it. There's two games you can play there. There's a third game you can play if you've got very deep pockets, and that's buying empty buildings. Be careful with empty buildings because obviously the cash flow is zero. But more important, there's a GST question because commercial buildings are sold as businesses, and if it's leased 50% or more, then it's classed as a business. But if it's at least 50% or less, it's classed as vacant, okay? And then you have to pay GST on it because it's no longer a going concern. Just
I didn't realise that.
There you go.
Below 50%.
There are ways around it. This is not the legal ways, I may add, around this. This is
of course.
not the time for all that sort of technical stuff. But just bear that in mind that vacant buildings can be big money for you if you've got very deep pockets because you can buy them at half price for the very reason that they're empty. So bear that in mind, folks, when you're going out next time looking at property.
Great stuff. So, Ollie, tell us some advantages and disadvantages of different types of tenants.
Okay, with different types of tenants in commercial property, it's quite an interesting situation. As I mentioned earlier in the little talk, that you don't want really have tenants that are likely to be affected by online shopping. I've found from long experience that the best tenants have always been the sort of, I'll tell you, there's takeaway bars and restaurants. Firstly, they have to be food clean. They have to keep the place spotless. That means you've got a spotless premises. Otherwise, they get a C rating or an E rating and they're closed down. So that's a lot of fun too. So, and they also, these restaurants and takeaway bars pour vast amounts of money into the premises, which is great because they can't take it away. They paint and they clean and they put in all sorts of fittings and air conditioning, and it's all yours by default. Great, you know? And if they leave, you basically get the whole place back and you can sell it. And I've done it more than once. I've taken a restaurant back, thrown the tenant out because they didn't pay the rent, and I've had a restaurant on my hands and sold the goodwill for a small amount.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the massive pluses behind residential. That's for sure. I mean, they usually leave a wreck. Where I remember a place we leased once, and we fitted the whole thing out, offices and carpet, and beautiful. It was. Yeah,
but you get the tenant. In this case, you get the tenant pays for it.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, I was the lessee.
So it's great news when the tenant fits the place out in a restaurant or a takeover, and he got all this fancy equipment and they abandoned it because they can't pay the rent. And you used to be able to grab it all under the Discretion and Pleasant Act, but you can't do that now. Cough, cough. You get my meaning. But if you happen to lock the door and lose the keys and they can't get in, well, it's just bad luck, isn't it? But we don't go down. That's illegal, isn't it? The other good tenants are hair salons. They do the same. They do the place up beautifully, and women will see women who get their hair done. Men, we don't get our hair done anywhere particularly, do we? But women will go to the top of a mountain to get their hair done at their favourite hairdresser. See? So hairdressers are very popular as tenants. I like them because they always have drag their favourite customers with them. So that's great news indeed. And also laundromats is another one. You can't do a laundry. Try as you might, you can't do your laundry online. It doesn't come up too clean, eh? Right. So laundromats are another very good shop type.
I suppose that could be certainly a thing of the future. We talked about houses getting smaller again, and apartments being such a popular type of living arrangement in the future.
That's right. So, well, laundromats are. If I own nothing else but laundromats, I'd be the happiest person out. They put all that equipment in there, and people are queuing up down the road to get the laundry done because they can't be bothered doing it at home. So there you are, folks. There's just three. I could go on all day. It's a lot of fun, and you can make quite a few bob out of it on the side. But you've got to have the stomach for it. It's not for everybody. So you can decide whether you want to be a blue chip buyer of commercial property, or you want to be one that takes shops and offices or factories and does something with them. And while we're on the subject, if you're going to buy shops, let's deal with that for a moment. You want to buy shops where there's lots of other shops. You don't want to buy a small, little, 2 or 3 shops in the middle of nowhere, because that becomes sort of an island of its own and only has a local custom. If you want to buy shops, you want to buy them where there's a lot of passing traffic or a lot of other shops there, because then it becomes a shopping centre. You don't want to go to malls. Malls are very expensive. Tenants are turning over all the time. You've got body corporate fees that can drive the tenants mad and it bounces back on you. So strip shops. And I don't mean strip, take your clothes off. I mean strip, running down the road each side, the best, and they're good money. That's just shops. When it comes to factories, the small factories, I mentioned this earlier, the best. You can buy 1 or 2 or 3 factories in a group of factories, in where there's a lot of industry. They seem to click together.
Yes, I see quite a few places built in the last 10 years that they're a clear side who's built, 15 or 20 of these wee factories. So that you're saying they're quite a good investment to get into.
There's a huge shortage of factory space for the smaller factories. Say under, talking old-fashioned areas, 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. So the small factories and these are the most popular by a long way, and there's certainly less maintenance. Now, you won't get anybody fitting them out, particularly as highly as, say, a restaurant, anything like that, but there's a huge demand. I can't repeat it often enough, and there's a very great shortage in many centres, in Auckland in particular, for small industrial spaces, and there's not enough industrial land, and it's going up in great strides. So if you can buy yourself, depending on how deep your pockets are, 2 or 3 little factories and a large complex of factories, although you can't perhaps expand it so easily, but it usually comes pretty bare shell with a small office and a toilet, but make sure a factory has wide doors, because people these days send goods by way of truck, so you want easy access and perhaps even doors big enough to take containers, and wide span and no pillars in the middle. So you want to get factories which are sort of built in the 1970s onwards, usually of concrete block and steel and that sort of thing. Old factories with pillars and small doors are no good at all, but very popular. And you can buy them for as little as a few $100,000, and they may be producing 8. Now look, nothing worse should happen than you end up with half a dozen factories with their plumbers and your car painters and electricians in them, and they'll be producing 10 or 11 or 12, 15% before you know it. And these sort of people are handy, and they don't bother you, and they do their own repairs, and it's money for jam in many cases.
Yeah, certainly something said for having tenants they don't hassle you all the time and
right.
and wanting little things fixed up, the tap fixed up, or
you never hear from it. Never in all the factories I've ever run, I've never once replaced a light bulb or fixed a toilet.
Good. Just going back to something I mentioned early on, maybe some people have trouble getting into. I think they might have trouble getting into commercial. I know a few people that have built a little syndicate up of between 2 and 5 people. What's your sort of suggestions or experience, or what have you seen with 2 or more people getting together buying commercial?
Okay, well, we're talking about syndicates. It doesn't matter whether it's a partnership, a syndicate, a group of people. It's people who have come together for a common purpose.
Yeah.
And that is to buy a property. Now, this is tricky. If it's your best mate, well, it's only 2 of you, maybe not so bad. But as soon as you get 3 or 4 or 5 people into a group, partnership, syndicate, call it what you like, then you better make sure everybody knows what their position is in that syndicate or partnership. Who guarantees the mortgage? All of you, some of you, none of you, or what? Who does the management? All of you, some of you, one of you? What happens if it becomes vacant? Who pays the rates? Who pays insurance? All of you, some of you, one of you, and so on. So you've got to sort that out in the beginning, not at the end. Everybody gets very giggly and goes into these deals without thinking about that. So you want to basically sit down and make up for want of a better term, a partnership agreement.
Yep. How
the little syndicate's going to work and who's responsible for what. And put it in writing. You can get your lawyer to write it up if you're not sure. I know it sort of takes some of the fun out of it to do that way. But it's really important, because when the proverbial hits the fan, that's when the trouble starts to show itself.
Totally vouch for that. I mean, I've done a lot of joint ventures, as people know, and always have a joint venture agreement before you start, and all you're trying to do is just mitigate any risk that happens in every situation that might occur.
Yeah, we're not talking about
there in black and white.
Yeah, we're not talking about the big syndicates out there that float off chunks of stuff. This is a private little syndicate of 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever people. So get those facts sorted out before you start on these things. But they can be very profitable indeed, because obviously more money is going into it and more hands to help, and there's somebody to talk to, because it can be a lonely business on your own. But it's good fun, and I've been in lots of small syndicates and partnerships or joint ventures, call it what you like. They're all the same. Doesn't matter what you call them. and they've been very, very profitable and very useful as long as you've got good mates, women or men, with you that understand what the story is and don't get too excited about something when it goes wrong and get excited when it goes right.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like working with people who are just if things go wrong, things go wrong. That's part of life.
You do 10 deals
and you live with it.
If you do 10 deals, you're lucky if you get 8 out of 10. Life is a matter of majorities. If you get 8 out of 10, be happy, because nobody I know ever gets 10 out of 10. So if you're 8 out of 10, or even 7 out of 10, but 8 out of 10, and you're ahead. I've
mentioned that to a few people. You said that in the last podcast, Ollie, and I'll vouch how accurate that I personally think that is.
Okay, it's been nice talking to you.
Yeah, hey, thanks very much. And we've probably already just touched the surface, but we've gone into a few more points for commercial. It's a whole new game in residential, and a whole new window that can open up if that's what you're inclined to do. Go and talk to someone that's done it. Ollie's obviously done it more than most people in the country for many years. So
give me a plug.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a plug. You gave me a plug last time, I think, Ollie. So thanks for your time today, and thanks for listening.
Okay, see you.
We would like to thank Ollie for coming back onto our podcast series, and I'm sure you enjoyed this as much as I did. Feel free to contact Ollie or me about anything you didn't quite understand. If you know of someone you'd like to have on our podcast, contact us at propertyventures.co.nz or info@propertyventures.co.nz. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care.